Welcome to Incredible Idaho. I'm Jack Hemingway. Our show has explored a wide spectrum of wildlife research, from sage grouse and bighorn sheep to salmon and caribou. But a show like this can be quite deceptive. We tend to condense an extensive research project into a tightly packed 6 or 7 minutes. But in reality, good, solid scientific research requires years of study and careful data gathering before any conclusion can be drawn. Time is the key. It took 2 million years of wind and water to shape these towering basalt cliffs along the Snake River Canyon. But it only took a century to change the flatlands above. The last 100 years has seen drought, livestock grazing, and military maneuvers combine to dramatically alter the land. But this area still supports the largest population of nesting raptors in the world. Among the birds of prey that use this area are prairie falcons, an estimated 200 pair. Earlier this spring, Incredible Idaho took you along on a capture operation. An adult male was trapped and fitted with a small radio transmitter harnessed to his back. Biologists from Greenfault Consultants are tracking him and 30 other prairie falcons in a study funded by the Bureau of Land Management and the Idaho National Guard. The idea is to measure the effects of military exercises on these raptors and their prey. Intermittent military activity occurs on a 138,000-acre territory within the birds of prey area all year long. But at intervals throughout the summer, it escalates into a series of 2-week annual training sessions for National Guard units from all over the country. Alongside the khaki, camouflage, tanks, and targets are biologists charting the behavior of the birds of prey.
They seem to be more active in the morning, and I observed a prairie falcon and a northern harrier using this area.
The observations that biologist James McKinley makes today will be compared to those he made a week earlier, when the same area appeared like this. This is the second season of a 5-year study. Long-term observations are necessary to judge other influences such as drought, livestock grazing, and fluctuating prey populations before conclusions can be drawn about the effect of military activity. But this year, biologists are entering a second phase of the study.
On belay.
Up until now, researchers have followed each marked prairie falcon and kept an account of the number of nestlings they hatch. But no data has been gathered on survival once the young fledge and leave the nest. This year, biologists are radio marking and following the offspring as well.
1, 2, 3. I can see 4 chicks, and we do have 5 here.
It's kind of a result of, I think, the need to look more at what's going on with the population rather than just the individual adults.
So I've got the 5 chicks in here now. I'll get this pack back on my back.
Biologists call it productivity.
Okay, I'm heading up, Linda.
And it's a measure of how successful a pair of adults are, not only at nesting, but more importantly, bringing off independent young.
A lot of nestlings die before they become independent, and the further along you can get a good measure of the productivity of that pair, the better off you are in terms of knowing how man is affecting that productivity.
These chicks are about 29 days old. Once they hatch, the young grow rapidly, fledging, that is, leaving the nest, at about 38 days. This is the prime time for the biologists to attach radio transmitters. The nestlings are old enough to tolerate some disturbance, but too young to fly.
This is a small leg mount or tarsal mount radio that we're putting on.
It's attached with cotton thread that will eventually rot, allowing the bird to shed the transmitter within a year.
The females are larger than the males. In fact, the easiest way to tell usually is to look at their legs. The female has a much heavier tarsus and just a bigger foot than the male does.
The 2 males and 3 females are packed down the cliff and back into the nest. As the biologists leave the area, the shrill challenge of the circling adults echoes off the canyon walls. 1 week later, during routine radio tracking, research biologist Mary McFadden suspects a dead fledgling. In a marmot hole immediately above the nest, a chick lies motionless.
Oh, there's a little fledgling.
You know what? They were laying down in the marmot hole. That's what they were doing. They were sleeping. Great.
In 1 week, the young prairie falcons have changed dramatically. Most of the fluffy down has been replaced by feathers. They're only a few days away from flying. This little jaunt up to the marmot hole is just a first step to exploring the big world that awaits them, the magnificent cliffs and canyons of the Snake River. Biologists will track the young fledglings every 3 days for the next month and a half. Each year in late July, the ground squirrels go into hibernation, and the prairie falcons disperse, looking for better hunting grounds. Birds of prey, such as the prairie falcon, have been teamed with man for thousands of years in the ancient traditions of falconry. The practice is thought to have originated around 2,000 years BC in ancient Persia. It began as a means of gathering food, of hunting for fresh meat. The Christian crusades of the 11th and 12th centuries brought it to Europe. The falconers and their birds became spoils of war. In Europe, falconry became known as the sport of kings. The tradition was highly revered, and laws were passed dictating who could own certain birds of prey. It became the exclusive pastime of the aristocracy. But today, falconers come from all walks of life, numbering nearly 20,000 worldwide. For 4,000 years, man has been teamed with bird. But it's only been in the last 20 years that we've mastered the skills necessary to raise these remarkable birds in captivity.
It's what we call human socialized, which essentially just means it was raised from a chick and initially imprinted on people. As they get older, it goes a little bit beyond the imprinting description. It's more of a socialization that occurs with their maturing. And the females will accept people then as their surrogate mate.
Master falconer Les Boyd has 25 adult falcons in his facility. Some are natural pairs, birds paired with one particular mate. But this female peregrine, named Blue, thinks of Les as her mate.
The male's primary responsibility at this time of year is providing food for the female, and he usually plucks it. So I'm plucking it.
This soft-spoken man has been one of the pioneers in captive peregrine breeding.
They're great from the standpoint of just being able to close hand observe, feeding behavior and incubation behavior. They're just quite a resource in terms of learning, little things about the birds.
Les was one of the developers of the process of pair bonding with birds of prey, imprinting them on humans. Some birds of prey may have long-term pair bonds. That means they mate for life. In 1972, when the peregrine falcon was listed as endangered, there were very few birds available to provide the diversity needed for a healthy genetic pool. A bird like this female, thinking of Les as her mate, can be artificially inseminated with the semen from a number of different males.
We call it cooperative artificial insemination. And the bird postures, and we just shoot the semen into the cloaca from a little syringe.
Les also developed an extraordinary technique to encourage males to voluntarily donate their semen. It's called the hat trick. As Les imitates the mating sounds of a female, this male gyrfalcon becomes agitated. The bird eventually perches on Les's head, ejaculating into the rubber bumper fixed onto the rim of his hat. The results go straight to the microscope, where Les checks for sperm cells.
He's going out of reproductive condition, and so I'm never sure whether there's really cells in it, but it looks good.
It's a busy time of the year for falcon breeders. One of the advantages of captive birds is double clutching. Les will breed a female, remove the eggs, and then breed her again, bringing off 2 sets of offspring each season. The first clutch is raised here in a series of incubators. This tiny chick is a little over a day old. Just like a newborn child, it needs to be fed every 3 or 4 hours.
Even the chicks, when they first come out of the egg, if you chip at them, they'll start food begging.
The food is a whole quail ground up, bones and all. Just the skin and viscera are removed.
As they get full, they start to get sleepy. And
most of these young will become the property of falconers, carrying on the tradition of 4,000 years. But 11 of the chicks will eventually be released into the wild as part of a nationwide endeavor to reestablish the endangered peregrine falcon. This effort has pulled the peregrine back from the edge of extinction.
The peregrine is, in a lot of ways, sort of the ultimate in evolution in terms of predatory birds.
The recovery of peregrine falcons by captive breeding and systematic reintroduction has been heralded as one of the greatest achievements of modern wildlife management. Private breeders like Les Boyd have been an integral part of that program.
Human beings are, a heavy influence on the world, and we have the ability to manipulate, and as long as we use, good sense in doing that, we can save some of the things that, we've destroyed. I think that's significant.
The recovery of the peregrine falcon is an excellent example of the Endangered Species Act at work. Unfortunately, success stories are the exception. As man encroaches on the environment, more and more plants and animals are in need of protection. This year in Idaho, 3 wild runs of salmon have been added to the threatened and endangered species list. The numbers are frightening. Last fall, only 4 adult sockeye salmon returned here to their birthplace in the Sawtooth Mountains. In the fall of 1990, there were none. No question, sockeye salmon teeter on the edge of extinction. And Chinook salmon aren't far behind. In 1962, almost 28,000 fall Chinook returned from the ocean destined for Idaho. Last fall, there were 318. Returning spring and summer Chinook have dropped from 66,000 in 1962 to less than 6,000. The great historic fish runs have gone the way of the buffalo.
And I can't understand why we can't learn from things that have happened before. I mean, this is really a difficult thing. I mean, it's very possible that we could lose salmon, wild salmon, hatchery salmon in Idaho.
Studies have shown that the main threat to the salmon is the hydroelectric system on the Columbia and Snake Rivers. Up to 95% of the small fish simply do not make it to the ocean. They need the push of a river to send them downstream. Without water flow, they become lost in the large reservoirs created by the dams. Currently, in compliance with the Endangered Species Act, a team set up by the National Marine Fisheries Service is developing a recovery plan for the salmon. But in the meantime, research biologists are exploring the possibility of other threats to the salmon runs. For example, when wild salmon fry begin to emerge from their gravel nests in mid-April, they're less than 1.5 inches long. Do they become prey for larger fish?
It's a whitefish.
Fish and game research biologists Craig Contor and Dave Canamilla are electrofishing. The umbrella-like devices hanging in the front of the boat create an electric field that momentarily stuns the fish.
The simplest way to say it is it makes their muscles contract in such a way that they swim towards the electrode. And then when they get closer, then they'll become unconscious. They roll on their belly. Sucker there.
The search is for steelhead smolts. About 1 million hatchery-raised fish are released into the Salmon River each spring to make their way to the ocean.
The steelhead smolts are typically around 10 inches or so. They're big enough to eat Chinook fry. There is potential. Physically, they're physically capable, and whether or not that happens is not really well documented.
By mid-June, most of the steelhead smolts have left the Stanley Basin on their 900-mile journey to the ocean. But this fellow stayed behind. Biologists call it residualization, the term for a fish that does not make the long trip to the sea. It will never go through the remarkable change called smolting that converts these creatures from freshwater to saltwater fish.
What we're doing right now is trying to evaluate how many stayed here. And if a lot of them stayed here, we need to evaluate if they're having an impact on the Chinook, the wild Chinook fry.
Earlier this spring, biologists sampled the stomachs of 6,700 steelhead smolts and found their main diet was made up of insects. Possible remains of Chinook salmon fry were found in only about 10 fish.
0.1% of all the, right around 1 million steelhead smolts contained a Chinook fry. So we're talking a real small percentage.
Measurements are recorded.
It's a little over 11.
And a small clip is made on the tail.
That'll grow back. We'll be able to recognize that mark throughout the summer so that when we do a recapture, we can estimate the total number that are in here still.
Similar research is being conducted in Washington and Oregon. So far, studies show a very small percentage of salmon fry fall victim to these larger steelhead smolts. This same river carries juvenile sockeye salmon on their long journey to the sea. The trip begins in nearby Redfish Lake. For about a year after emerging from their gravel nests, the small sockeye fry call the cold waters of this mountain lake home. But early spring triggers a genetic urge to travel. They start at Redfish Lake Creek, washing downstream until they encounter this, man's attempt to save the few sockeye smolts still in existence.
Julie and I come here in the mornings to check these traps. They're set up so they pass. The larger fish, the greats, are close enough together that all we'll catch are the sockeye-sized fish. Everything else will pass on over.
The fish trap stretches across the entire stream, blocking the route to the ocean. But it's designed so that only every other bay has a trap, allowing some of the sockeye smolts to pass through naturally and continue on their way.
We're towards the end of our run. We've caught mainly just suckers today. We haven't caught any sockeye here for the last few days.
So far this spring, a total of 161 sockeye smolts were trapped. About half of them were marked with tiny computer chips called pit tags and released back into the river system to renew their journey to the ocean. The others were shipped to Fish and Game's Eagle Hatchery near Boise.
These were brought down to us about 2 weeks ago, and we're right now trying to wean them onto a pellet food. So far they've done very well.
You could call Eagle Hatchery one of the last refuges for Idaho sockeye salmon. The survivors are kept in this carefully controlled environment. Pioneers in an experimental program to raise broodstock to replenish this endangered species. Here also are the offspring of the 4 adults that returned last fall to Stanley Basin. About half of those eggs, 935, were sent to another hatchery in Seattle. If any sudden catastrophic event should hit either place, such as disease or water problems, the whole brood wouldn't be lost.
They're doing really well. We probably had approximately 94% survival from egg till right now. Excellent. Now I get to show you our prize fish. Last year these fish were trapped at Redfish Lake Creek, much the same as the fish that you just saw. They came in at an average of 9.4 grams. Right now they're almost a pound apiece, which is 454 grams, and about 13.5 to 14 inches long. They've just really grown, and they're doing really well. You can see they're a healthy looking fish.
Most of this group will become sexually mature in the fall of '93. The hatchery broodstock program is an important step in saving the species, but not the answer to recovery. Whether Idaho will ever again see the amazing salmon runs of the early '60s remains a mystery.
If we can get them to the ocean and back with a decent survival rate, of course we could have a sport fishery. But the question is getting them to the ocean and back.
We usually think of owls as the ghosts of darkness, as haunting shadows in the forest. But tonight, as we close, we're going to show you something different. They take over abandoned burrows, the leftover homes of badgers and marmots. Here in this hole in the ground, they build their nests, laying up to 11 eggs. The burrowing owl is a daytime creature who makes his home in the bright, sunny desert. By June, the young are close to fledging, and sometimes difficult to distinguish from the adults. Even full-grown, the burrowing owl is less than a foot high, a testimonial to nature's wondrous diversity.